Game Week 6 proved one of the most decisive game weeks of the season so far, with a record number of managers triple captaining Erling Haaland and many more activating their wildcard chip, leading to huge point swings across the board and devastation for those who did not have the major assets of the game week. And now the question is how we respond to such an eventful weekend in order to either drive home our advantage or swing that momentum back in our favour. And today we'll be looking at all those players we're considering to buy, and perhaps even more importantly, which of those underperforming irritants we need to swat out of our teams, because the fixtures are starting to turn, and with more and more people using more and more chips, our long-term planning needs to be on point if we are to keep climbing those rankings and walking the path to glory. And before we get into that, we need to have a look at my team and how we got on in game week 6, and as you can see, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Yes, the Norse Force once again slammed home a huge triple captain haul, following up last season's 17 points against Ipswich with a 16 pointer against Burnley, and my word did he keep us hanging. By all rights, he should have been subbed off long before he smashed home that stoppage time brace, with the game already won and the schedule intensifying for teams in Europe. But this is why you pay the big money for those assets with the individual hunger for those top scorer accolades, because they tend to stay on the field longer than they should. And after seeing Mo Salah and Bruno Fernandes get all those stoppage time sickeners in recent game weeks, it was nice for me to experience the flip side of that coin, especially when the rest of my team flattered to deceive, with the exception of the Bournemouth duo, who surely everyone has in their team by now. As ever in this game though, what the FPL gods give they so often snatch away, leaving you down on your knees screaming why at the skies. And though they gave me the Haaland heroics, they also sent their avenging angel Gabriel to remind me of their all-encompassing power and their sick, twisted sense of humour. You see, if you saw my game week 6 reaction walking video the other day, you'll know I recorded it on the Sunday morning, and in it I said it didn't matter if I left Livramento on my bench, because if he gets 2 points then so what, but if he gets a clean sheet it will mean my beloved Newcastle have secured at least a point in that big grudge match against the Gunners. And then I watched the game and I see the aura killer himself stretchered off after an awkward landing, with perhaps his last 6 points for many months secured 20 odd minutes before the final whistle. And as the doctors carried him off, a sinking feeling in my heart knew what was going to happen next. See, in that walking video I'd also extolled the virtues of the DEFCON defenders, arguing it makes more sense to pick those over someone like Gabriel, because Senesi, with his 6 DEFCON bonuses in 6 games, he'd already secured the equivalent of 2 defenders' goals. Is Gabriel likely to score in the next 3 games, I wondered aloud, or is someone like Richards more likely to get 3 DEFCON bonuses and perhaps also an attack in return? Well, never mind 3 games, it was barely 3 hours before Gabriel headed home the winning goal so close to the end, meaning that Haaland triple captain advantage was somewhat minimised over those who wildcarded in Sunday's main character. And I call Gabriel that because everything seemed to revolve around him, especially when it comes to those FPL gods making me look like a fool. You see, it wasn't just a walking video analysis. After Lord Voldemort hit the Avada Kedavra to Arsenal's clean sheet chances, I broke the long-standing rule I have of never posting about a game in progress, and I said Gabriel is so weak when competing for headers at St James's. First Joe Linton a few years back, now Voltamada. Then just moments later, Gabriel forearm smashes a 6'6" bloke in the face, and there's no VAR interjection, there's no red card. Then he sticks his arm as high and far from his body as he can, yet the penalty isn't awarded. And we can debate the nuances of the laws of the game all we want, but one thing we can agree on is that Gabriel was a very lucky boy. We have all seen them given, especially at those grounds for those teams. So Gabriel's lucky to be on the pitch, he's lucky not to be behind, and then Gabriel again delivers the message of the FPL gods with that winning goal. Another last gasp strike which harms my team, scored by a player questioned in my video, mocked in my post, and who shouldn't have been in a position to score at all. 13 points for a player I should have signed, while the player I did sign, Josko Gvardiol, conceded a deflected goal to a team who have limited attacking threat. This game, man, this game! But even with that divine intervention from the most vengeful of deities, it was still a good game week, with another huge rise in the overall rankings for my comeback kings. It's a shame it wasn't more, given the fixtures 8 of my players blanked in, but any game week where you finish considerably above the average score is a good week. The question now is how to continue on this trajectory, and of course the main area to explore is the best transfers for the game week, and I want these thoughts to mean something to all of you. I want to entice as many of you into my wicked web as possible, so I will cover as many possible players as I can, as concisely as possible, to make it as relevant as possible for your team. Then we will look at my Game Week 7 team at the end. So we'll start with the players to sell, and what is important here is that we prioritise our transfers correctly. If you have injured players like I have with Livramento and they are in your first team, then they have to be the priority. If it comes to a choice between an out of form player and an out of action player, well, as my mate Roberto always says, the form is temporary. So in those circumstances, sell the injured player rather than the one with the poor form, because one can turn it around while the other cannot. And then after that, it is about prioritising. So yeah, Watkins got back in the points at the weekend, but he has Tottenham, Man City, Liverpool and Bournemouth from game week 8. It's not ideal at all, but he also has Burnley this weekend, so selling Watkins isn't the top priority. Even if you think Gyökeres looks great this week, Watkins can easily match or beat him, so he should not be the number one transfer on the agenda. Ultimately, we can carry one or two bad players in our teams if the rest are getting the points, but we cannot afford to waste those spots on non-playing players because they have no potential to turn it around. So removing the injured players from our starting 11 is the priority, and then after that, if players are becoming rotation risks, they are the next priority, because we have seen every week the importance of those 90-minute men. None more so than triple captain Haaland's stoppage time brace. Only after those do we need to panic about out of form players, in my opinion, which of course you are entitled to disagree with. In this game of luck, it is all about giving ourselves the best chance to get lucky. So we will do a quick rundown of the major transfers in consideration, starting with which players and teams I would prioritise selling. Liverpool, I would probably sell all of their assets if you are in a position to do so. Their attack is inconsistent. Ekitike is clearly the best option, yet he's perhaps the least likely to start after his shirt swinging shenanigans. Their defence is misfiring and their fixtures are horrible for the next 5 or 6 game weeks. Pivoting to Arsenal assets is such an obvious play, whether it's Van Dijk to Gabriel, Salah to Saka, Gakpo to Eze or Ekitike to Gyökeres. Personally, I'd prioritise the attackers because Van Dijk is one of those DEFCON daddies who could score in any game. But if you have the luxury to make any of those moves, it feels like such an obvious play, especially given the fixtures swing back in game week 12, where literally reversing the move is the best option. We will all overthink this throughout the week, but these transfers all make sense and they keep your team optimal until that second wildcard becomes active. Now Aston Villa, they aren't a priority sell for me me this week. I would wait another week unless you are selling an expensive Watkins in a double move to fund someone like Saka or of course Erling Haaland, who is undeniable at this point. I know people are getting shaky feet about Chelsea, and if you have one of their defenders, maybe now is a good time to get off them. But if you have Chalobah and you have the cover, you would probably have benched him this weekend anyway, so don't worry about him. Cucurella, well, he's now apparently a rotation risk and he has Liverpool, so I would consider selling him, especially given he is the perfect price point for Gabriel or Gvardiol. Joao Pedro is one causing doubts for people, myself included. What I would say though is that his output this last 2 games has been severely hindered by the 2 red cards, and last season he did very well against the big teams, so this weekend could be good for him. Chelsea have a fantastic run up until game week 16, so where possible I would avoid selling their players, except maybe Cucurella because of those rotation issues. Manchester United are struggling, and though they are putting up decent attacking numbers, they aren't converting to goals. There is no fluidity to the team, and now Bruno Fernandes has missed 2 penalties. We can't know for sure whether he will continue taking them, and look, he probably will, but he's an expensive player and he could be the pathway to Bukayo Saka, who is also on penalties but plays in a good team and in an attacking position. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, like I always am. If you have an opportunity to sell your Man United players, I would do it. They are terrible. Their manager is clueless with no ability to adapt, and that Sunderland fixture is a lot trickier than the green colour would suggest. I know people are emotionally attached to Bruno Fernandes, but much like Mo Salah, you can get what he gives you from Iliman Ndiaye, and Ndiaye is several £1,000,000 cheaper. For me, every single Man United asset is a sell, and once they are out of your team, I don't think you'll be rushing to get them back. If you still have Nottingham Forest assets, which unless you have wildcarded them out you probably do, I think they are all sells too. Their defence has been poor since about March, and now they have Big Ange. Their striker situation is unclear. Morgan Gibbs-White was benched. There are other players in better teams offering more than Elliot Anderson. The Forest fixtures are taking a turn for the worse. Maybe Anderson you could keep for now because he's likely a rotation player in your squad anyway, but all the rest, just get them gone. They say it's not worth making goalkeeper transfers, but Matt Sells is worth a hit to get out of your team because no Postecoglou defensive assets are worth the risk. All the rest of the teams, I think they will be fine for this week. Maybe they'll get the points, maybe they won't, but they aren't the priority for game week 6. We can deal with them another day. However, there are always exceptions if you have the luxury to make a move, so I will quickly run through a few. Pedro Porro, he's a sell for me. He's offset pieces, he doesn't get the DEFCON points. He's £5.5 million and he's now a rotation risk. Thanks for nothing, pal. See you later. Like I said earlier, Cucurella is much the same except £500,000 more expensive, though Chalobah I would keep for now. Tino Livramento has to be a sell given that injury, and it's a shame because the Newcastle defence looks top draw. Even if he wasn't injured though, he'd still be under consideration because Livramento has neither attacking nor DEFCON potential, and at £5 million there are better options. Dan Burn though, I think he's worth keeping because as we saw, Eddie Howe will play a suboptimal formation to keep him in the team. That Newcastle defence is elite and Burn has some DEFCON potential. However, while I would keep him, I wouldn't bring him in just because there is that element of rotation risk. Spurs attackers, apart from Kudos, I think they will all need replacing soon, but this weekend they should be fine. Just roll with them and hope for a goodbye goal. As for who to bring in, well, isn't that the question? Now, most people will be saying this is the week for Arsenal, and it is hard to look beyond them. Gabriel got the goal at the weekend and he has that potential in most games, and with their fixtures there could be clean sheets in abundance. If you are buying a premium defender, he is the one this week, even with limited DEFCON potential. potential. And look, I know people will say it's boring and everyone will have him, but in this game you have to pick your battles. If you don't have Gabriel, I bet you wish you did for those 13 points at the weekend. Now imagine if he kept a clean sheet as well and you didn't have him. Now imagine how many of your rivals will have him if that happens again this weekend, when he plays the team that always concede goals from corners. Then it's Fulham, Burnley and Sunderland as 3 of the following 4 games. I'm not saying Gabriel is one for the long term, but I would advocate minimising the risk of him destroying your team over the next few weeks and getting him in, and looking to make your gains on the field elsewhere in your team. In that Arsenal attack, it's a little bit tougher. I think Gyökeres looks terrible whenever I see him, but if he's ever going to come good, it's in this fixture run. He's already smashed Leeds after all. I would prioritise Saka above him though, because it looked like Saka would be on penalties, and he's a better player and, more importantly, a proven FPL asset. The punt is Eberechi Eze, and I do like that punt. I thought he looked excellent against Newcastle, and without Nick Pope in goal, he could have put up monster numbers. The only question surrounding Eze, and Saka to some extent, is regarding their minutes. Now for me, I think that's a risk I would take, because the reward potential is so great, but I maybe wouldn't risk both of them. I would rank the Arsenal assets as Gabriel top, then Saka, then Gyökeres, then Eze, but you'd have to expect all of them to get some good scores over the next few weeks. Now realistically, the Arsenal assets are your priorities this week. If you don't have Senesi or Semenyo, it isn't too late to get them in, because I expect those points to keep ticking over nicely. And obviously if you don't have Haaland, it's time to stop being stubborn and to sign the Scandinavian superstar. Mo Salah in a 7.5 million striker to Haaland and Eze or Semenyo looks delicious. I don't think there are too many other players worth stressing over this week, but I do like the look of Brighton's fixtures for quite a long time, and I would certainly consider Yankuba Minter until the African Cup of Nations. He's absolutely nailed. He has returns in all of his last 3 games, and in the most difficult game until he departs for that tournament, Newcastle could well have Dan Burn at left back, and Minter has both the narrative and the history against us. For £5.9 million, he is an absolute bargain. He would be my midfielder alternative of choice. As for defender options beyond Senesi and Gabriel, I do like Vardiol, especially now he has the best goalkeeper in the world behind him. The fixtures aren't the best though. I also think the Palace defenders still have a lot of merit, even with Bournemouth and Arsenal in the next 3 games, but maybe you could wait on them. Alderete of Sunderland has to be the 4 million defender of choice, but be aware the fixtures aren't the kindest from game week 9. Now we have to talk about Newcastle, because our fixtures are wonderful for a long time, which makes this harder to say, but I would avoid all of our players apart from Nick Pope. And yes, I love Big Dan Burn, and he does look nailed, but here's the thing: in Share, Botman, Burn and now Malik Chow, we have 4 elite centre halves. At left back we have Lewis Hall returning to fitness, and after the folly of our last European jaunt, I fully expect Eddie Howe to have learnt from the mistakes and to rotate players properly. So I couldn't tell you with any conviction that any of our defenders are nailed. Even Kieran Trippier, who is our only class right back now, he's not nailed because Eddie Howe played 3-4-3 against Leeds, and if he can do that against Leeds, he could do that against anyone and play Jacob Murphy wing back. So if you're wanting to that elite defence, it has to be Pope, unless you are prepared for your defender to be rotated out at some point. And to be fair, with the quality of DEFCON defenders on offer this season, maybe you could get away with it. Maybe that northeast double up of Burn and Alderete is the key to success. I just can't advocate for it. As for our attack, look, I know people will think it's worth a gamble, but it just isn't. Our wingers have all underwhelmed, and all of them could be benched at any time. Voltemada, he he looks good, but the service he is receiving is terrible, and Vissa should be back in game week 9 too. It is not the right time to invest in Newcastle's attack, especially with such little certainty over game time and formation for all of them. I was considering Gordon myself, but not anymore. Why bother when I could just get Eze or Undai or Ismail Assar or Enzo Fernandez or Yankuba Minter, and I know they are nailed in attacks performing far better than ours. It's just not the smart play. And when you look at my team for next week, the sad reality is I may well end up with more Sunderland players in my team than Newcastle ones. And though that does feel like a betrayal, and I can't see myself going through with it, but in this game we all love, sometimes you have to put your emotions to one side. If I was to replace Livramento with Alderete, that would save me £1 million while lowering the cost of my bench. I could then replace Harvey Barnes with Eberici Eze. I'm not saying I will do that, but I'm not saying I won't either. Likewise, I could do Wood down to Isidore and upgrade Cunha to Saka. But then I do think Gabriel is the most sensible move, so maybe I get him in for Livramento, go 4 at the back and switch Barnes for Eze. I want Barnes, Cunha and Wood all gone, as well as Porro and Agbadou, but it's about priorities, and I do think Livramento to Gabriel should be my priority. With my second transfer, Porro has Leeds, which is fine. Agbadou is on my bench and cheap, so not a priority. Cunha, well, he will start and is against Sunderland, so I suppose I can give him one more week. So it's down to Wood or Barnes, and if I get Gabriel, I can't afford any of those Arsenal attackers I mentioned, which does make it a bit trickier. So maybe I take a hit and I sell Wood and Barnes for Eze and a cheap striker, or Gyökeres and a 5 million midfielder, maybe even Granit Xhaka. I don't know. I need to think about it, and I need to see how the European games play out. Maybe after all I've said, I'm going to end up forced to risk going without Gabriel, and instead I have to get him in for Porro next week. All I know is it would have been much simpler if I hadn't tried to be clever and I'd just got Gabriel instead of Gvardiol last week. It's just always so hard to sign players playing my team, and after getting Semenyo in game week 5, I just couldn't do it again, and now I've been punished, and hopefully you can learn from that. So yeah, there you are, quite a lot of information this week, but it's a big week for the fixture swings, and I wanted to be as comprehensive as I could, as concisely as possible. Hopefully you can take something from it and get yourself one of those glorious green arrows this weekend. Whatever you do, just remember to work out your priorities first and what benefits your team, not just this week, but in the longer term too. Do your future self a favour and make next week's team easier for them by tidying up your mess. And above everything else, feel free to ignore everything I've just said and to sign that differential diamond you just have a gut feeling about. Because more than numbers on a screen, this game is about fun, and you will have a lot more fun if you do. Unless you do what my man D-Unit did last week and you captain someone like Foden over everybody else's triple captain Haaland. Some risks just aren't worth taking. Ha ha!